The season again, huh? Y'all been out there as much as I have, so practice. But so I'm very excited again for the season. What's going on? Glad we're in practice. But it's great to be out there on the field. Get to see a lot of young players that get in and interact, and very happy with the class in which we brought in. See a lot of ability and a lot of guys that are making the transition very quickly and doing a really nice job. So very pleased with that, and very pleased with our upperclassmen how they're adapting and, as I say, adopting those guys into the family and welcoming them in and taking them under their wing and mentoring them, and very proud of that. I mean, I think our guys do a tremendous job of leading those freshmen down the right path early of how we do things, why we do things, how we practice, the way we carry ourselves, all that type of stuff. I'm very proud of our senior leadership in that regard. Again, practice has been going very well. I'm very excited about where we're at. Again, this team keeps developing its own personality and identity, but one thing it will do is we'll practice hard and we'll compete. And we'll tweak and turn as we go and feature the parts of the offense and defense and special teams as the new faces appear or the new guys that will take roles will appear. But I love the attitude again. I think the guys have kept their foot on the pedal with every practice. One of them we let up just a little, but that wasn't much at all. And very pleased. That was a big, sometimes that happens when you have a big installation day at times, and things like that happen. But very pleased with everything so far. Again, we've got a long way to go. But again, I like our football team, and we've got to put the pieces in the right place and get guys to accept the right roles and do the right things. But that's all. That's every year. We'll have this same conversation. We'll say it. You almost say the same thing every year, so you can see where they all fit in and how they fit in from that standpoint. But again, very excited and fun to coach. Question.
Jim, apparently this offseason after winning the championship, you've reached out or studied other coaches who have
More study. More I did reach out.
Talk about that and the reason why.
Well, I mean, I think, we always look at negative things that we do or things you want to fix problems. I want to see why guys had success. And there's very few that have had extended success for long periods of time, because it's very hard to keep that hunger. It's very hard to keep the organization and the personalities and all those things. And, I think from that, and I think it's even different in college than I think it is in pro. That's the one thing as I studied, I tried to make a very conscious effort of, because there's much more turnover on a college football team than there is on a pro organization. Generally, you can keep a lot of the main pieces for long periods of time, and if there's a transition, there may only be one or two people, which does change it. But in college, you're having a lot of parts that'll be in and out. So spend time with those guys to try to get structure, but then try to pay attention to other college guys, and always going back to Coach Bryant and John McKay to just what you could read. Not the thing about back then, there wasn't much to study because of books and things. It wasn't the media, and it's not what you have today. You know what I mean? Because I do think it's different studying pro guys than it is college guys. I haven't mentioned that as much, but there is a difference because there's a huge changeover. But I wanted to try to repeat things again. Sports to me is consistency and performance over a long period of time. It's what a season is. That's what programs do. And guys have been able to do that and sustain that. Some of the problems they've had, and some of the things that you try to anticipate issues before they occur and try to get a leg up.
Is there a common denominator with guys and what they did to try to?
Well, I think the common denominator is that they didn't try to recreate the wheel. They didn't try to reinvent things, but they stayed hungry, and they kept a chip on their shoulder. They played with an attitude, and they played with a purpose. And I think it's so hard if you're not passionate about what you do. I think it's hard to be great at it, because generally, and there's so many people in our business that are passionate. And human nature is to relax. You know what I'm saying? And just because you don't repeat doesn't mean you don't relax. But I think, you gotta, and then identifying the guys I think that have done it are very good psychologically of identifying their teams. I think being able to push the right buttons, because there's so many interchangeable parts from year to year. It's not about talent. And that's where I think that's my personal opinion, why the NFL misses so many times on first-round draft picks. I think that's why we in the media get caught up in recruiting. We're so interested in talent, which is key components to be there, but how good of football players are they? Or how good of basketball? There's a difference between I think that's one of the things in the NBA. You don't see anybody shoot the basketball anymore. like they did back in the old days. Now, athletically, I don't think there's any doubt. We're bigger, faster, stronger, jump higher, do all that. But the game of basketball is still putting the ball in the goal. You know what I mean? And I think trying to make sure that we identify the best football players and identify who we are. You know what I'm saying? I think that's very critical. And we're able to push the right buttons at the right time to get the guys in the right place. Because there is tons of talent. I mean, on all these teams, everybody has talent. I think that's one of the key components. And as I stated, great, I think that's the one thing they've been able to do. And I think that's a challenge every year because the parts change so much.
Jimbo, you've had that experience back with LSU, coming off a national championship season and then having to, try to repeat it. What kind of lessons can you take from that when you go into this season?
Well, I mean, I think there's always lessons from everything. Like that season, I think there's a fine line between staying hungry and forgetting the last one, and also remembering what you did and keeping the confidence of the last one. I don't want to forget we're national champions. I don't want to forget the things we did well. I don't want to forget that what we can achieve, and you can, because guys, till you ever achieve that, you always wonder in the back of your mind, do I really have it in me to win that championship? You can say that, to me, that's the most important part of all, that I know I can. Not hope I can or say I can or whatever, it's been done. And I think, there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. There's a fine line between keeping a chip on your shoulder and destroying confidence. And I think that's the line you got to walk. And I think, one of the things I've said before, I don't want to destroy their confidence, but I want to keep their hunger, and that's a hard thing to do. Not easy. If it was easy, everybody do it. Or it's been done a lot more.
Jimbo, I know you got a lot of fish to fry right now, but and you got to worry about your game with Oklahoma State.
If you notice, I'm grilling fish now, I'm not frying.
Has it given any thought to you about the situation on the 30th where if Jacob wins a job at Alabama, you could have 3 kids you recruited and developed starting for Division I teams, same day, national TV?
I'd be extremely happy. I'd be very proud because all those guys that I was able to coach are great kids and great individuals. They got great ability. They worked their tail off and did nothing but represent us in the right way. And I hope they all have tremendous success. I hope they play in the NFL for 80 years. I hope every one of them do. I really do. I don't think it doesn't mean anything to me. I just hope for the kids because I know how good of players they are and how hard they work to get the positions they're trying to get into.
Well, you said when you're recruiting, you never really know until they get here.
Mm-hmm.
You've had some of these kids here now for a week. Do you think you know about some of them now? Who are a couple or a few that have really stood out?
I'm smiling. I put it this way, we may get caught by the game worm for having our live well too full, but I'm not throwing any of them back. The ones you try to sneak in with. No, I'm glad the guys we recruited. I really am. There are a lot of the guys, again, I say that to you, coach a guy you really don't know him. And sometimes that's why getting him in camp and different things is critical. But at the same time, I think there's some guys out there that are really potentially have some. I go from I think the 3 wideouts have done a tremendous job. The 2 tight ends I think are outstanding. The front guys, that always takes longer, but man, you see the athleticism, you see intelligence, you see football instinct. Quarterback JJ, I think, have been very pleased. He's got great arm talent, big, strong. He likes to learn. The back, Vickers and Cook have been really good. Really good. Vickers has been even I knew he was good to our coach, but I think we knew Cook, and Cook jumped off the charts actually. Vickers is a heck of a football player too now. The defensive front guys, again, we love that group. I love all those guys. The backers, and we had 2 secondary guys, Trey Marshall and Malika in there. And I know it sounds cliche, but I've been very pleased with all of them. I really have, Corey. And I think you'll see a lot of those guys on special teams are interacting in the 2 or 3 deep, getting rotation in different spots. You really will.
Speaking of not knowing about recruits, how do you kind of predict the future when you're looking at a 225-pound high school kid who may wind up being a 280-pound college kid?
It's a magical thing. It takes a lot of time, a lot of reading. Well, genetics, history, family history, bone structure, those kind of things are all, feet, hands, head, shoulders. The things in that structure. Some guys, like you say, are going to be 300 pounds if they work. Other guys are going to be 300 pounds. It ain't their choice. Them and God had a meeting, and they're going to be 300 pounds or 200. I think those things are all very critical. History of your family, size of your family, all those things are extremely critical in that, and I think we try to spend a lot of time and research to be able to project those kind of things.
How does that fit into the, because I know you guys use critical factors similar to what Coach Saban does. Do you worry you miss on some guys because you have?
You always worry, but at the same time, I don't, it's like worrying about losing. You can't worry about losing and winning. But if you do, you're always apprehensive, you're always scared to play. I mean, you got to, I think that's where trusting your instincts and trusting your passing. To me, history is your greatest teacher. In the situations you've been in and people you've seen and trusting your own eyes. I think that's one of the hardest things to do for a coach now more than ever. Because you know why? And I'm not saying this about y'all. Y'all fans, everybody else thinks they know so much about the players now because of video, the social media. I mean, they all have their opinion on it. So it becomes, you know, and some people, why would he, you know, and he can run and like you're missing, you know what I'm saying? And you as a coach, and I say that, it's not that we don't care what you think. Or I really can't care. I got to care what I think and trust my own instinct because at the end of the day, it's my tail on the line. You know what I'm saying? Or our coach's tail on the line. I think that's one of the harder things to do now, Randy, because that everyone knows so much about our players. I mean, think about this. When you were a player, you were anxious to come the first day of practice, who was on your team, who's a freshman, I mean, to meet everybody. These guys know everybody when they're juniors and start recruiting each other. I mean, they're at a camp, they're at this, they're at a tryout event. I mean, think about how much more interaction these kids have, and y'all have, and know the knowledge of these kids than when I was. I mean, you just went to school, you had no idea who the other, you didn't know how many, they signed 4 quarterbacks, 1 quarterback. I mean, you had no earthly idea. I mean, it was just such a different field. But from a recruiting standpoint, like you say, when you're judging and taking guys that you feel are right for your organization or program, I think in our business, people do feel that. And then in certain areas that, you know, because everybody has that opinion, I think you got to push it and do what you think is right.
Jimbo, you recruited as an assistant coach, but in 5th year, you know, recruiting as a head coach, what have you learned about or changed in what you look for in a recruit or how you've adapted?
And nothing more I changed as a recruit. What I think is what I tried to always do, even when I was an assistant, I always said that, try to think as if I'm the head coach, because what you can do, there's so many good athletes out there today. There's more athletes than there ever been. And people say, why didn't you take that guy? He is good enough to play. Maybe that guy will play in the NFL sometime. I don't disagree with that. You know what I'm saying? I think, but as a head coach, I think the key component is, what is your team like? It's like everybody says this, and it's another. How is the offense? Is it still going to average 50 points a game? Is it going to average 4? Well, and I want it to average as much as it does to help complement our defense, and our defense help complement our offense, so that we can win games as a team. You get so caught up in offense and defense that we can't worry about that. And as a head coach, your job is to get the right 25 players that fit the mold of the team, not just getting. You could. I say you can shake a tree out there now in the world. And between 5'7" and 5'11", between 155 and 185 pounds, how many dynamic athletic kids out there that can run and change direction and catch the ball, and all of a sudden if you get and you got to have those guys. If you get a whole team of them, well then you ain't got a big back. I mean, getting situated. What I think as a head coach, my point is, you got to fit it to the whole team and the needs of what you got to have: short yardage, goal line guys, red zone guys, third down guys. You know what I mean? Who can you run behind? I mean, this lineman, maybe one lighter lineman, but you've got to have certain big guys that can hold tight ends that are athletic, but then other tight ends that can block a Mario Edwards. They can line up. I mean, that's great. He can catch and run, but he's 250 pounds. Mario Edwards grabs him by the throat and throw him across the field, and you ain't gaining the yard when you run the stretch. I mean, I think that's the thing from a head coaching standpoint, is fitting all the pieces together for the team, and not just getting the best players, if that makes any sense. I think that's as much, and I always tried to do that as an assistant. I always felt, and when coaches, that's why as a head coach, I think it's so vital that you make the decisions on the final decisions on the players and what goes on, because an assistant coach will go get all the best players for his position, and that's what he should do. But you got to see team-wise how that all fits in. And I think that's where I think as a head coach, that's why I try to stay so involved in everything we do with recruiting. It's not to micromanage, it's to manage. That's called managing. That's called leadership.
Coach, you mentioned Mario Edwards. Can you talk about him at the defensive end position? I mean, in the past, you got Bjorn Werner and Brandon Jacobs, guys that have just piled up lots of sacks. He had 3.5 last year, and people have been kind of waiting for him to, stockpile all those sack numbers. What
Sacks
is the
don't,
next
sacks
step?
don't equate to greatness.
Well, what equate
You
with?
better go watch that film. You watch that film, that guy's a heck of a football player. You watch when the draft comes around, where he's at. That guy's one heck of a football player. And how you, and people can get sacks, people can rush in. I mean, he didn't get sacks, but we had the lowest scoring defense in the country last year. Even less than the 2 years before, we had all the sacks. So my point is, the style of defense, what a guy is asked to do and how he's asked to do things. And that guy can rush the passer, he can play inside, he can play outside, he can play on a big tackle, he can go around you speed. That guy there is as athletic and as dominant as any of the ends we've had in that other group. He's as good as any one of those guys that has played to this level, as good as any of those guys.
He's kind of interesting in the fact that, I mean, he's a big dude.
He stayed between 295 and 305.
Yeah, you know, I think we get used to seeing 4.3 ends as being, you know, like 260, 260.
Did you ever go back to LSU? We had Martin Spears, Marquis Seal, and all those guys.
3-4 ends that are more of like the run stuff.
No, they were 4. We were 4-3. We won 3.
What I'm just saying, his size though would kind of.
He can play anything. He can play D tackle, he can play D end, he can play a 4 technique, he can play a 9 technique, he can play a 7 or a 6. The guy's 305 pounds and can stand there and do standing backflips in front of you in full pads. I mean, he's athletic. I mean, watch the play he made on the quarterback in that bowl when he played with zone read and run out there and caught quarterback from Auburn, grabbed him by the arm and then ran him down and made a tackle. I mean, I'm not saying they don't make them all, but that guy right there is athletic, can run, is blessed. He's as strong physically and as naturally powerful as anybody I've been around, and can play on the edge.
How critical against some of these offenses now that are spreading you out, but they're trying to run it straight at you? He's the guy who can set the edge like that.
The edge critical. I mean, because that can reduce, it can make those inside guys. That's the thing you got to have. That's why I keep saying size still matters. Because people are running the football and they're spreading. You think you got to go get all these nickel and dime guys. How about getting a big, get a 6'3", 6'4" linebacker, a 6'7" end that can play a tackle or squeeze a guy down, but then go play in space and length to grab guys. I think that's where it's going. I mean, look at your basketball teams in the NBA. A lot of them, they're all long rebounders. Get a hand up on the perimeter, those 6'6", 6'7" guys. I mean, those types, the Telvin Smiths of the world. You know, the Matthew Thomases of the world. They're 6'3", 6'4", 235 pounds that can run like the wide outs, but then can go take a 300-pound guard on. You know, and inside guys like Eddie Goldman, who can run under 5 flat, 320. I mean, that's why those front guys that are big and agile are so more critical now, I think, than they've ever been, because the game is spread, so they're getting isolated more. That's a great point. I mean, it's a big point.
On the other side of that, you know, people talk about the tight end kind of going away, but you guys are as deep at tight end as.
I don't think it is. I mean, look at the NFL, I think it's emerging. Because I think it gets back to big athletic mismatch guys. Linebackers that can't run with them, or safeties that are too little for them. You know what I mean? And still, I think being able to play conventional, I think plays into our hands because not many people are doing it. See, that's it used to be when teams that spread, you had all this conventional, they didn't know how to play it. Well, all these teams are playing spread now. If you can line up and be powerful, that makes them on the team you're playing all of a sudden turn around and say, wait a minute now. We're playing a nickel. We're a 4-2-5 defense. That's a nickel. So they got regular people in there running with 260-pound tight ends and a 240-pound fullback. I got to line up and take an ISO or a counter. See, that plays into our hands. I mean, and then but still have the skill to spread you back out. I mean, you can reverse that on them just like they're trying to do to you on defense. You can reverse it on offense by going conventional on them again. And how much time do they get to see it every day in practice? How much do they get to practice against it?
Jimbo, everybody's throwing no huddle, spread, and now the biggest thing is I want to run 100 offensive plays a game. You don't buy into that.
No, I do if it's what it takes to win the game. I think what we've gotten away from is offense is on one side, defense on the other. Last time I looked, it was a team game. And I think you have to do what you think your team can do to score points. I mean, and we scored the most in NCAA history and didn't go no huddle. I mean, and Alabama didn't win a bunch of championships and haven't went no huddle. I mean, if we do go no huddle, we just under controlled pace. But we can go fast. I think, again, I don't buy into the cliche that you have to do that or you don't have to do that. I think, how does it fit to your defense? Your offense and defense have to mesh together. The year before, I didn't feel we could do that as well with our defense, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, how your defense fits affects how you play offense, and how your offense fits how you play defense. I mean, I truly believe that. And then your kicking game. You know what I mean? I'm still, it's a team game, and I just, if it was what we thought we had to do, I would do it in a second, I promise you. But, and we can. Not saying we won't.
Two more questions.
Coach, are you confident that Jameis has the support system around him that he needs, that the focus this year, to the extent that he can control it, will be on the football field and his playoff?
Yeah, I do.
Have you made some changes there?
No, I mean, we always graduate and learn, and we educate him. I think it's not changes, it's education. You can change all you want, but if you don't learn, change doesn't mean anything. And it's not maturity, it's changing your culture and your thought process and educating yourself to the situations of which occur around you. I think education is the key component. And we provide resources to be able to bounce things off of when issues occur.
Coach, oftentimes talk around the offensive line, setting around tackle play, but how important have Josue and Trey been in kind of transitioning the offense from where it was when they started to now?
You know when I say this, look at how, you want to talk about one of the big changes in football that no one talks about? All of a sudden in the last 2 or 3 years, you're seeing guards going in the first round. People, and all the spread offenses, okay? Here it goes back to your spread offense. What does spread offense allow everybody to do? Play a what? Shorter quarterback. Go back to what was critical for New Orleans, because now you're in the gun, you're in the back deal. You don't have to be 6'4" and drop back in front of all those guys. But you know what becomes more? Everybody talks about the athletic guys outside, but the integrity of that core, that pocket, where that guy's got to be able to step up and make a throw, has changed. Has really changed the game. It's why you're seeing more guards go in the first round than have ever gone before. And people are getting so big inside. What people are saying, we'll rush guys up, but we're just going to push that inside interior of the pocket to make you rush up, step up, and then we're not trying to get a sack. We're trying to collapse the pocket. See, if I'm a quarterback, like you talk about Mario, I'd rather have a guy come scot-free off the end than to take all 4 of them and just walk in. It's like the walls in this room. If they close down on you and you're in there, and you go, okay, where am I going? I don't go anywhere. That can cause as many interceptions and turnover. Would you rather have a sack or would you rather have a turnover? I mean, you know what I'm saying? So the integrity of the core of the pocket now is getting bigger than ever. So having massive inside people to be able to set that, so you have athletic guys on the edge, so you can step up and make a throw. That's been one of the keys for Drew Brees for a long time. Those big guards, they lost one down there to Tampa Bay, and he ended up retiring. Gene was a great player. But I mean, that effect, I mean, the interior core, those guys being able to set that and being massive like they are in there is critical, because D tackles are getting so daggone big in the world that it's one of Wolfo. I mean, what did New England do when he went out? And he said, we didn't have any sacks, made 3 give you. How many times he walked that pocket back and made the quarterback throw like this or throw like that, and they're picking the ball off. It's not, that's what I keep saying, it's not always what you see as the obvious, is what's making other things happen in other parts of the game. And those having big guards is extremely critical, more critical now than it's ever been in football. So it used to be like your guards to be athletic, remember? It used to be pullers and all that type of stuff. Well, now all the zone blitzes and all the blitzing, it's hard to run a lot of, like sweeps like that, because there's always penetrators. Now you can run powers and counters, lock it down and kick it out. So everybody's going all zone schemes, so you can block stuff. But you've got to be able to move those inside guys on the run too. So they're hard to find. Those guys have been extremely critical. I don't mean to go off, but they don't get the credit that they deserve for what they're doing with our team.
Jimbo, can you talk about the decision to promote Charles Kelly? And is it overstated when a program has to go through 3 coordinators?
I guess it is. I think it depends on the organization and how well your guys are adapted to handling the defense, and how well that guy is suited to take over for what, he actually had more experience than Jeremy did as a coordinator when you really go back and research it. I always knew Charles would be. He's a tremendous football coach, a tremendous guy. And I think it all reflects on how your players react to him, and that's been tremendous. I think he's done a great job. I think you don't always want change, but I think that change in the way we did things and the way our defense does, I mean, there's a lot of guys on that staff. I like guys that have big picture vision, not just a direct position coach. And it was a plan that he could possibly be a coordinator in the future when I hired him, and I feel very comfortable with it. Now, again, he's got to go out and perform, but what we've been doing here through spring and fall camp, we've been pretty good.
All right, thanks, Coach.
Anybody else? Thanks, y'all.